Hello everyone. In this video I just want to talk through a little bit of the group discussions that you have posted so far and tie these into some of the coursework and give you some overview information. The first post that you had for me was on fake news. There were 4 discussion leaders. There will be 4 leaders every week, and all 4 posted this week, so that was a great job. 13 people responded out of 16 who could have potentially responded. So a few people missed the response. If that is you, please make sure that you're keeping this on your radar for the future. I just want to talk about a few of the concepts that came up in this discussion where I think there's a lot of crossover between information literacy and the tools and skills you'll use to determine whether something is, say, fake news or not in your everyday lives, and how those same tools and skills translate into more academic-focused, scholarly research that you're going to be doing in this class and in other classes that you might take in communication studies. The first thing that many people mentioned was this need to read past the headlines when you are trying to determine whether a story is fake or not. It sort of goes without saying. It's kind of one of those no-brainers. Of course we would need to do that. And yet we all fall victim on occasion to just reading a headline and posting it on our news feed without really thinking. Similarly, we all can fall victim to basically getting a source, reading the title, maybe the abstract, and maybe only really reading the first few pages, finding one quote that will work for us really well, and plugging that into our paper to support some claim we're already making. It's a similar kind of unwillingness to sort of read past the headlines. You can fall into the same trap where the way you're using a source might not actually be an accurate or a fair example of the information that's included throughout the paper. It also means that you won't fully be engaging the ideas that exist in that paper. So this is a big problem. I see it a lot, but it's also been researched that a lot of students approach sources in this way. So I would really encourage you to use the skills of reading past the headlines, both in your everyday life to determine whether information is accurate, and in your scholarly research, so that you can really understand what a study is saying before you try to use it in a paper. This applies very much to the second point that many people mentioned, that one of the things that this requires is being patient and putting in the time to determine whether a source is accurate or not. Don't expect instant gratification. This is true in your everyday lives. If you want to know if something is real, if you want accurate information, you have to put some time into it to make sure that that's the case. That is also true in the world of scholarly research. Don't think that you can do assignments an hour before they're due and do them well. It won't happen. One of the things that you really need to understand about research is that it takes a long time, and planning for a long amount of time is probably one of the most useful skills that you can employ in writing any research paper. Giving yourself enough time to find the sources, to read the sources, and then to write about the sources will aid you greatly in this endeavor. Third, many people mentioned the need to sort of question what you read, to maybe not always trust what you're seeing, and to kind of maintain a skeptical attitude. This is certainly true in relationship to information that you receive in your everyday life. It's also true in relationship to scholarship you might read. A skeptical attitude doesn't mean you just discount everything. It means you ask certain kinds of questions. Some of the questions that we'll explore in this class are things like, do I agree with how these authors are defining this concept? Do I think that the sample that the authors have used tells me enough about this phenomenon? Or are there problems with the sample that's being used? Do I think that the authors may have missed some important variable that would affect the results of this study? These are the kinds of questions that you can ask of scholarly research that helps you to be a better reader and consumer of this information as well. The last thing I want to mention is this notion of gatekeeping. At least one person mentioned that, it's really a responsibility of reporters, of journalists, of publishers, of even social media sites to guard against fake news as well, to weed out and not allow fake news to be there. That relates very much to this idea of peer review, which is a process that's used in scholarly research. We'll talk more about that. You may have read about it already. Essentially, if something gets published in a scholarly journal or published in a scholarly book, it means that not only has an editor already looked it over, but it means that it's been sent to at least 3 different people who share expertise in this area, who have read through this, who have suggested changes, who have determined already that this is quality information and quality study. So because of that, there's a kind of higher level of trust because the gatekeeping processes have been pretty stringent in relationship to this work. So in each of these scenarios, there's a number of skills that you employ in your everyday life to determine the accuracy of information that you encounter. These are not separate from the skills that you'll be expected to use in this class and when doing scholarly research as well. They share a lot in common, and they'll aid you in both of those contexts. Now I want to move on and talk a little bit about the scavenger hunt assignment. There were 4 discussion leaders again, however only 2 posted. So again, please keep that on your radar and make sure you are paying attention to who's scheduled to be discussion leader so you don't miss it. One of the things you'll hopefully have gotten from this discussion is that there's lots of ways to find information. And there's no real wrong way. Many people had sort of different processes they might have used, and they were able to get good information from this. But there are some tricks that will help you, and I want to draw your attention to a few of those. So with the first 2 questions, the ones you see here, both of them asked about statistical information. A lot of people said that the first place they would go is Google, and from here you could get reliable and accurate popular press sources to give you the statistical information that you wanted to find. And that's true, it worked. A few people said they would go to specific sites that they already trust, like Pew Research, and search those sites to find this information. Also, a plan that could work. But I want you to also pay attention to some other techniques that you could use. In particular, using cite:/.gov in your search in Google, followed by Boolean search term and the keywords that you want to use. What this will do, what this little trick right here will do, is bring up only sites that end in .gov. That means only sites that are published by the government. So the government is in the business of compiling statistics, so if I need to find statistical information, it's a great place to go. And I can also feel pretty confident about the resources that I get from the government. So unlike if I just put this into Google, where I would end up with lots of pages and have to wade through a lot of maybe information that didn't work as well, when I use this little trick, immediately I get a number of sources that would sort of be perfect. So I want you to keep that in mind. Those little tricks can save you a lot of time. Many of these were covered in the website that I asked you to read on how to use Google. So if you didn't look at that, I encourage you to look at it again. The third question asked you about how would you find essentially scholarly sources for a research paper. Many people said Google Scholar is a place to go, and this is not inaccurate. Google Scholar is a great resource. I use it all the time. It's getting better all the time. But one of the downfalls of Google, but there's a couple of downfalls of Google Scholar. The first is that the sources that you get from here, you might not have access to these. So I might find citations, but I can't get the full article. I'd have to then go searching for the full article. I might have to go to the library to do that. By the time I've done that, I've already wasted some time. But if I start at the library and I go to Communication and Mass Media Complete, most of the resources that come up will be ones that I can access immediately, the full text immediately. So even though this might seem like it's saving me time, in the end it actually might be wasting some time. The other difference is that in Google Scholar, I'm likely to get, if I put in the keywords masculinity and hip hop, I'm likely to get a few 100,000 hits. That's a lot of material to try to wade through. If I go into BSU's library and I type in the same things, I'm likely to get between 20 and 40 articles that really work. So that's a lot easier, more manageable amount of information. I'm more likely to be able to take a careful eye looking over 40 articles and find ones that really work for what I want to do. One last thing about images, this had come up. While images, you can imagine, would really matter to this, it's important to keep in mind that most scholarly research does not publish images for a variety of reasons. One of them is that it's very expensive. And so don't let that stop you, because most likely you're not going to find scholarly sources that contain images in them. Number 4 was asking to find Pepsi's official response to public criticism. This tails on a few things. One is the difference between a primary and a secondary source. So if the first place I go is Google and I type in some keywords to find this information, mostly what I'm going to get is a bunch of newspaper articles that talk about this issue. They might have little quotes from the official response, but they won't be the official response themselves. This is what we would call a secondary source. If I want to find the primary source, the actual official response, I'm going to have to go to the source. And that means I probably have to go to Pepsi's website. On their website, they probably have a link to Public Relations Room. From there, I should be able to search and find the official response that they made to the public criticism. So don't discount going to other places beyond Google to look for the information that you need. This one, you have a particular citation and you want to find a specific source. This is actually really important, because as you start to find more resources for, say, an academic research paper, you're going to find sources that are cited in a source that you might be using, and you might want to go and look up that article. So how do you find it? One is to just cut and paste the whole thing into Google or into Google Scholar. This will work for many people, but you'll run into the same problem that you might not be able to access it from there. Sometimes you can, sometimes you can't. But if you go to BSU Library, you're more likely. And the easiest way to do this is to look for the journal title, to search by the journal title, in this case, Communication Studies. There's a video already online that says finding an article from a citation. Go look that up if you don't know how to do this. It's really helpful and useful. The other nice thing about using this technique is that when I find this article, I also will see links to the references that the article has cited, as well as to other articles that have cited this article. That becomes a really nice, easy tool to use to build up a set of articles that I might want to include in a paper. And the last one concerns, a word that you're unfamiliar with. Again, Google is not always the perfect answer. Many people mentioned something like reference sources. So someone had mentioned going to dictionary.com and then following up with cite:.edu. Well, this would give you those edu pages. This is a pretty good technique. And what this technique actually refers to is a kind of a reference source. That something like Wikipedia, or even the database of Credo, what those do is give you these broad-based resources that can help you build a bigger understanding about a concept. The nice thing about Credo is that it's written by scholars for scholars. So unlike Wikipedia, which may be written for a general audience, if it's a scholarly term that I'm interested in looking up, rather than an everyday one, using Credo, it is more likely to get me high quality information in relationship to that. Some people had mentioned going to BSU Library. Again, it's not a bad place to start. Putting the author name, Baudrillard, into Communication and Mass Media Complete will get you a lot of articles that talk about Baudrillard or maybe are authored by Baudrillard. But you may need to start at a more elementary level to build a better understanding of simulacra before you even get to here. And that's the end. I'm running out of time. So I'll talk more about